Week 15 saw some massive changes in terms of usage and injuries that you need to know about headed into Week 16 to help you win and get into that fantasy championship. Let's start with Josh Allen, who looks like he might be the fantasy MVP this season. Over the last 2 games, he has 93 fantasy points, averaging a cool 46.6 fantasy points per game over that stretch. This is the greatest 2-game stretch we have ever seen in fantasy football ever from any player. And I don't see why he would start slowing down now. This guy is the Buffalo Bills offense. He gives you so much through the air. He gives you so much on the ground. He's a lock to score rushing touchdowns almost every single week. Josh Allen absolutely has the ability to smash and break fantasy football this year and be that guy in the fantasy playoffs that basically it's like, if you had Josh Allen, you won your championship. I'm actually kind of excited to see what he does over the next 2 games, just to see if he can do something absolutely unbelievably historic over this stretch here and just break fantasy football. But regardless, Josh Allen trending to be the fantasy MVP and maybe even the real life MVP. I don't need to tell you this, but if you got Josh Allen, you're starting Josh Allen no matter what. Now, we got a lot of questions about Brian Thomas Jr., and I'm happy to say I answered yes to almost all of them. That was one of the things I definitely got right in Week 15, and I'm really happy to see that Brian Thomas Jr. is still thriving, even with Mac Jones under center. You look at the last 2 games, he has 18 catches, 191 yards, and 2 touchdowns on an extremely unbelievable 26 targets. Look, Mac Jones has a lot of flaws. Mac Jones is not a starting QB in the NFL long term, but Mac Jones at least is locking on to Brian Thomas Jr., just looking for this guy over and over again. And he finishes the fantasy playoffs with the Raiders this week. You got to feel great about that. And then a banged up Titans secondary in Week 17. If you got Brian Thomas Jr., he's basically a must start every single week from now till the fantasy championship. And file this under things I didn't think I'd be saying in 2024, but wow, the Aaron Rodgers, Davante Adams connection is looking elite right now. Sure, it took until like the last 4 minutes of that Jags game, but regardless, these guys both went off, and over the last 2 games, they've both also gone off. Davante Adams, 307 yards and 3 touchdowns over the last 2 games. Aaron Rodgers, 628 passing yards, 4 touchdowns, no interceptions over the last 2 games. In Week 16, they get a soft Rams secondary. I know they did okay against Brock Purdy and the 49ers, but that was a lot to do with the weather. I don't think it's going to be an issue for these guys. And then they get the Buffalo Bills, who just gave up over 500 passing yards to Jared Goff and got torched by Matthew Stafford the week before. I can't believe it's 2024, and I'm saying this, but Aaron Rodgers and Davante Adams might be guys you need to start in your fantasy playoffs the rest of the way. Hey, if you're enjoying any of the content we're dropping for you or this video here, just do me a quick favor. Hit that like button, subscribe. We greatly appreciate it. The next big takeaway is how good Rico Dowdle has been, despite the fact that the fantasy production hasn't matched. Over the last 4 games, this guy has 98, 123, 141, and 149 rushing yards. Now, unfortunately, he only has 1 touchdown over that span, which again has kept him from being one of the best fantasy running backs, as he probably should have been over that stretch. But he's been one of the best real life running backs, and I don't think a lot of people are noticing. Now, I will say he does have a couple tough matchups to finish here. He's got the Tampa Bay Buccaneers this week, which are an improved run defense, and then that tough Philadelphia Eagles run defense. But I think he's been so good, you pretty much have to keep Rico Dowdle locked in, at least as a low-end RB2. And at some point, you got to think this guy is going to start scoring touchdowns, and it could start as early as this week. And it's Week 16, and it might be the return of Jerome Ford in fantasy. This is a guy who got off to a good start earlier in the year with Nick Chubb out. Then, of course, Nick Chubb came back. Great story this year, right? Coming back from that brutal knee injury. Scored a few touchdowns. Okay, didn't really do much else. Unfortunately, suffered a broken foot in Week 15. Out for the season. A brutal blow for this guy. But this has opened up the door back for Jerome Ford to once again be the workhorse running back in this Browns offense. And he was pretty good in Week 15 given the opportunities. Had 104 total yards and a touchdown in that game. And now this week, it's a great matchup against the Cincinnati Bengals. We know that defense, probably a bottom 2 defense. Jerome Ford has to be the number 1 waiver wire ad if he's still out there on waivers, and is an upside plug and play RB2 in Week 16. And file this one under things I didn't think I'd be saying in 2024 either is the Jameis Winston, Jerry Jeudy connection is real, and it's great for fantasy football. Since Jameis Winston became the starter in Week 8, Jerry Jeudy is the wide receiver 3 in fantasy football in PPR scoring, averaging over 21 points per game in that stretch. Now, Jameis Winston has been a little up and down as a quarterback, but it hasn't really affected Jerry Jeudy. Now, this is what I want to say, though. This is the lesson here. It's not that Jerry Jeudy is so good. Yeah, if Jameis Winston plays, Jerry Jeudy pretty much a must start. Here's where I think we need to take a little bit of notice, though, and pay attention to this week and see how it plays out. Jameis Winston was just benched in the fourth quarter off a terrible game for Dorian Thompson-Robinson. Kevin Stefanski saying, hey, we're going to decide a little later in the week who our starting quarterback is. This doesn't sound good for Jameis Winston. It doesn't really make sense for the Browns to continue with Jameis Winston. They're not playing for anything. Dorian Thompson-Robinson at least has youth on his side. Maybe you can get a look at him and see what he can do, even though they've done that in the past and it didn't work out too well. But I do think there's a real possibility we see Dorian Thompson-Robinson over the last two games, and sadly, I think that's going to put a big hit on Jerry Jeudy's value here. So if it's Jameis Winston, Jerry Jeudy no doubt must start. If it's Dorian Thompson-Robinson, probably going to have to drop him down a little bit. But no matter what, Joe Burrow, half a yard on underdog is a must pick that you have to take. If you're a new customer, you get this new customer special. Joe Burrow just needs to get 1 yard on Thursday Night Football. Just make sure when you're joining for the first time you use promo code ENDGAME, because not only will that get you this new customer special, but also up to $1,000 in bonus cash that you can use right away. Now, another big running back injury that's going to really alter the state of fantasy football going forward is David Montgomery, likely to miss at least the rest of the regular season, if not more, with an MCL injury. I know he left that game a little bit with the knee injury, but he did return. It didn't seem serious. Apparently it is serious, and this is going to open the door for Jahmyr Gibbs to be an absolute workhorse, potential league-winning running back. Even this year, only playing 49% of the snaps, Jahmyr Gibbs is the RB3, averaging about 19 PPR points per game. And the Lions are still fighting here, still fighting for that bye, especially coming off the loss. Now they're right there with the Eagles, fighting for that number one seed for the bye, and he gets two great matchups against the Bears and the 49ers, who both have not been very good against the run this year at all. Jahmyr Gibbs absolutely poised to smash the last 2 weeks in fantasy football. If you've got Jahmyr Gibbs, he is an absolute must start. And so is a healthy Bucky Irving, who I didn't think was healthy in week 15. This is definitely one of my biggest misses. Brian Thomas, one of my biggest hits. Bucky Irving, unfortunately, one of my biggest misses. I really did not think this guy was close to healthy after barely practicing all week, being a game time decision, but apparently he was. 15 carries for 117 yards. 82 of those yards were after contact. This guy has mostly been great all season long, and now he gets a smash finish to the fantasy season. This week, it's the Cowboys and their terrible defense, and then in week 17, it's the Panthers and the worst run defense against running backs in fantasy football. If you advance with Bucky Irving on your team, he is an absolute must start in fantasy the rest of the way. And are we going to have to start viewing Malik Nabers as a must start? I mean, all it really took was for the fourth QB, Tim Boyle, to come in the second half to unlock Malik Nabers, but somehow he unlocked Malik Nabers, even got this guy a touchdown finally. Now, as I sit here filming this, we don't know who the quarterback is going to be in week 16. Tommy DeVito in the concussion protocol. Drew Lock still coming back from that heel injury. Maybe it will, maybe it won't be Tim Boyle. If it's Tommy DeVito, if it's Drew Lock, I'm not falling for Malik Nabers off this big game. But if it's Tim Boyle, hey, maybe we can gamble on him in week 16. Maybe he actually has some upside with slinging Tim Boyle, I guess. And then finally, is Xavier finally worthy of being in your fantasy lineups? Are the Chiefs finally trusting Xavier Worthy as their wide receiver one? He's got 6 or more targets in 4 straight games, and in week 15, a very impressive, not only 11 targets, but a 39 first read percentage. And now in week 16, he gets a very generous Texans secondary. I know they just did a good job against Tyreek Hill and I guess Jalen Waddle for what little he played, but this is still one of the worst secondaries, giving up a ton of points to wide receivers. Now, of course, the big question mark here is going to be Patrick Mahomes. Dealing with that ankle injury, is he going to play? Remember, the Chiefs have to play on Saturday, then on Wednesday, because why NFL do we have games on Wednesday just because it's Christmas, and then again on Sunday. So maybe Patrick Mahomes does not play this week, and maybe we see Carson Wentz, and then I'm probably going to be out on Xavier Worthy, or at least maybe more like a desperation flex. But if Patrick Mahomes gives it a go this week, I think you've got to look at Xavier Worthy at least as a solid start this week. And you definitely got to look at all the videos we got for you here in Week 16 to help you win and advance to your fantasy championship. You're going to find them all in our Week 16 playlist right here.